Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of boards, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series, where I take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. For this video, we'll be reviewing the rule book, The Artificer's Guide to Magic Items, designed by Matthew Carson for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. This review has been sponsored by the publisher, and a review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you are interested in a sponsored review, you can reach me via email, Twitter, or Discord, or my submission form at roguewatson.com. And if you enjoy the content, consider using my affiliate links for your online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Now, I always considered myself a fairly good student going through school. I wasn't a big fan of school stuff, but my area of expertise was always in writing and in doing like research projects and book reports and all that. It was not with math or mathematics. And this book has quite a lot of math in it. In fact, it's even said as much by the designer, who comes at you like hat in hand and says, wow, that's a lot of math in this book, and just be prepared, which I appreciate, because this rules book, probably more than any other I might have looked at, kind of makes me feel not super smart, which isn't to say the book is not very well designed. I think it's great. It's first of all, it's really great looking. It's just professionally edited, and the layout, the design, the way the artwork comes together for what is basically a rule book with just a few items in there looks absolutely amazing, and the professionalism on display is sexy as hell. It is a little intimidating for me, of just, average smooth brain, trying to parse how to operate these rules for the Artificer with item creation. So the designer posits that the Artificer has not gotten a lot of love, and that Artificers, their whole thing is creating items, and that is baked into their classes, but perhaps they could have some additional crafting systems. I'm pretty sure I've reviewed products before that also have tried to expand on 5e's extremely limited, kind of bare bones, skeletal crafting system, because I think there is some value in having a crafting system, but you run the risk of overcompensating, I guess, and really trying to throw too many rules into it, which I'm the same way when I design like any other system that we end up running in my games, where I usually over rules it, creates a lot of complex systems and checks and things, and then when we actually play the game, I end up throwing most of that out and just going with like whatever works the quickest. Now, why MMV or mileage may vary in terms of what your group wants to do and how much they enjoy doing a very mathy system. For example, there are worksheets included in this book, which I will show you at the end of this review, and that is going to be a good indicator if your players are very excited about being given worksheets as part of their D&D new rules system, or if they're just going to like chuckle and shake their heads and immediately pass them back to you, which I think my group and the groups I've normally interacted with would probably be more the latter than the former. But that's not to say I don't want to just scare you off of this product, or even necessarily give it a thumbs down. I think it's actually, again, phenomenally well designed, but it's a little more niche than what I was hoping for, because of the advanced rules I think it uses that doesn't necessarily feel at home with 5e. But again, that's very tricky, because anytime you're going to add rules on, you're automatically going to make things a little more, complicated. And 5e, I think, one of the biggest strengths is the elegance of simplicity, maybe too much, right? There's a lot of things where the DM could use more rules, but I also hesitate, for example, to move on to something that's like Pathfinder, because to me, that's a little bit too crunchy. I know a lot of you are just right now like, all right, now, come on, you gotta, it's not that crunchy. Here's why it's, I've looked at it, and it's, sure, it does things it does a lot of things I really like, but I think just for me, and especially my core group that we do the live streaming games on, I think it's a little too crunchy, for the same reason I think this is going to be a little too crunchy. Also, it cares about time spent. So I think one of the problems, maybe the main problem I have with this product, is instead of giving you a bunch of skill checks that the Artificer has to do, it breaks everything down into time and money. labor and materials cost, basically. And the money sink is fine. Obviously, there should be a money sink there. And in fact, that's something that crafting could help solve in 5e, because goodness knows that players are soon burdened with just hundreds and hundreds of gold and probably not enough things to spend it on. But then if you look at the magic item, like the way the economy works, and I believe the designer even says that at some point, maybe at multiple points through the sidebars, the fact that the economy kind of really breaks down if you try to use like what's just in the Dungeon Master's Guide, for example, in terms of how much items cost, and the fact that you can jump up from like rare to very rare, and suddenly it goes from like, I don't know, 1,000 to 10,000 or something gold pieces. Like it just gets really, and the time spent making things in Dungeon Master's Guide also doesn't really make sense. Nobody's spending like 50 years to make, a cloak that does like something that a second level spell could do. Like it just gets really, really insane. Now, granted, there's not magic items. I guess the other problem is the disconnect, right? Because Forgotten Realms isn't necessarily supposed to be full of magic items that the normal people are getting all the time, but we only see it through the lens of adventurers who are getting magic items all the time. So there's a weird disconnect there between what is supposed to exist in the world and what do like the superheroes of that world like normally get to interact with. So the rules here break it down between a bunch of different costs and then things that can affect the cost of the item and the time it takes to make that item, as described in work weeks, which are 8-hour day. See, I don't even know why we get this specific. I don't need my players to be getting this specific. But the work week, I love that the symbol, I swear to goodness, I haven't played a Sims game in many years, but this little S, I don't know if you can see it too well in the video, but there's kind of a little S with like a circle in the middle and then like another S on the bottom. It looks like the simoleon sign. I swear it looks like some other symbol I've seen, but that is apparently what the designer is using for work weeks. And then you come up with their crafting input, which is their specialty as an artificer, plus maybe their subclass specialty. So if they are already special, like an armorer, working on armor, for example, then you have to look at the base item rarity and how powerful the item is. And then there's all these different like factors you could throw in there. Like, do you have cultural or racial specialties? Does the lab or workshop you're working in, how good is that environment and the tools you're using? Can you use assistance from NPCs or even from other players to help you craft things? All of that will affect the final number, which you divide one number by another number, and then that's how you come up with how many weeks and how much time it takes. My campaigns, probably the entire campaign might only take a couple weeks, right? Like we're usually under quite a time constraint because I'm playing it more like like an action movie, but that's been, split out between, weeks, I guess. But in other words, there's not really a good downtime for people to just kind of hang out and do things and like craft items. Now it does, and the designer kind of realizes that and says, hey, you can craft on the move, and it's just take all the time and double it or have it, whatever you want to describe it as, and then they can still craft their stuff. But then when they're home, then they can do other. Well, like I don't know, my players, at least in the campaigns I've run, they don't often have a home base. And I mean, like we played Tomb of Annihilation, for example. Like they never, like they're just on the road the entire campaign. They never return to any previous location. Like you wouldn't really be able to use the standard crafting rules in that entire campaign. So I guess it depends on how you're going to run things. If you're running it like they've got a home, like an Acquisition Inc. thing maybe, or like earlier where they've got a home location and they're going off on these, adventures and then coming back, like smaller adventures, then I see where you could kind of use these crafting rules a little bit easier. But my experience has been that they often don't have a kind of a home base. Instead, they're traveling to some exotic location, doing a lot of adventuring there, dungeon crawling, going to different areas, traveling across, the map, and it just feels like they don't really get a chance to like work in a lab or even really have several days worth of downtime, let alone an entire week. So thankfully there are rules here for crafting on the move, but it does feel like you're not really getting the most out of the system. But again, that's part of my experience. Your mileage may vary, where my characters don't get a lot of downtime between adventures, and then by the time they would, the campaign is over and we start new characters. I do want to talk about, let's see, there's an example for improving items because a lot of this, notice how I said it was time and money, and there were no skill checks involved, which I find kind of shocking and disappointing because I players like to roll skill checks, DMs like to roll skill checks. That's kind of the whole system there. There are some opportunities for skill checks, but there's not a lot. One of them I found was if you want to improve items, there's a whole formula for that. So for example, you want to like upsell loot that you found, which the example here is an art, which I love the examples, by the way. It really helps break things down for me, even though I'm still only barely understanding what's going on. An artificer finds a crude short sword on a dead goblin and attempts to improve it, rolling a 25 on their crafting check, which is going to be whatever their tools, the appropriate tools are. The threshold for a crude weapon is 6. So we'd look back here on this table, and we've got categories for different items, and then the DC depending on the quality of that item. This means that the artificer's roll met the threshold 4 times. 4 times 6 equals 24. Okay, I can understand that to an extent. A short sword is normally worth 10 gold pieces. Excuse me, this weapon was crude to start, so likely worth half of that at 5 gold pieces. The artificer has now improved the goblin blade to be worth 20 gold pieces. 5 times 4 equals 20. I think I can understand that much, and if I were to take any rules from this system, I think I would use that one. But the problem with this system is that I think we started doing this, but after the first campaign or two, we stopped doing it, which is and it feels very video gamey. And I actually like basing my games on video games quite a bit, the pacing and things, but my players aren't looting like every sword off a goblin, for example, and then turning around and selling it. Instead, I'm just giving them the shit they care about: gold, gems, scrolls, potions, and magic items. That's all. We don't care about anything else. And that's part of that, like, that, you know, you come up with a lot of rules and things and then go into it. And then when you actually play, at least with my group, and then you start going like, you know what, we'll just cut out the middleman. Like, here's just the monetary value. Like, here's the stuff that matters. It just speeds things along and helps. Again, we play, you know, we get to play a lot, but we don't play like hours and hours when we do play. So we really want to get through the media stuff. And that is not picking up rusty goblin swords and then selling them for a paltry sum. So because of that, I don't know how much I would be able to use the item improving rules here, because it seems like that's part of the idea is you would pick up, you know, whatever random shit and then be able to turn around and improve that and sell it, which is cool for the artificer. But again, I'm not really I don't really care about my players being able to get their hands on a lot of that stuff and doing it. So the one that we would probably use is the artificer actually creating magic items. Now, that's already baked into the artificer's abilities, right? They get, magic infusions, I think, where they can kind of make their own magic items and even give them to players. So that's already included in there, but this allows you to make completely your own magic items or even improve existing items. For example, you wanted to like mash different item abilities together. You just want to turn like a +1 into a +2. There's rules for that. Or if you wanted to transfer one magic item's power into another. We're really getting to like the Elder Scrolls crafting system, I think, too. Wasn't that an ability you could do there? I'm pretty sure you could craft magic items. I don't remember if Skyrim could do that, but I think I remember doing that in like Oblivion or Morrowind or something. I'm trying to remember, but that's an interesting system. You can kind of break the game pretty quickly because 5e already is... Gosh, I'm ranting a lot about 5e in this one, but that kind of happens with rules stuff, I guess. 5e, the characters are more powerful than ever in any edition. I say this as somebody who's not actually that familiar with the other editions, but I'm gonna boldly claim that. I think as a baseline, players are generally more powerful in 5e, which means magic items are not nearly as necessary in past editions as they are in 5e. You can actually, other than like creatures who have magic resistance, which is a very common thing as they get higher, so you'll need at least like some kind of weapon that is considered magic, whether it's a +1 or not. But like even without a +1, like players can still absolutely kick ass and have all kinds of abilities and things without having any magic items. So once you give them magic items, you start making them a little overpowered, which is something I run into in a lot of my games because I like giving my players magic items. If you let your artificer craft magic items or improve magic items or add on to them, you could upset the balance even more. Thankfully, again, the designer kind of accounts for that, which I appreciate. Like, there's really a lot of thoughtfulness put into this. All the little concerns I had. I mean, the concern I have overall is still, holy shit, these rules are too much for me. But I really do appreciate the designer goes through and kind of walks me through, walks over to me on the pitcher's mound, puts a steady hand on my shoulder, and is like, "Hey, it's okay. Here's how this works. Here's where my thought process is. Calm down. You got this. There's just one more out, and we're out of here. We go home." I really do appreciate that. That helps put me at ease because I do have all these little anxious worries about balance and cost and everything. And I think the designer does a really good job of making a note for that and saying, hey, here's your options for dealing with that. You can just not use this system, or you can use it with some kind of limitations or penalties or whatever else. But when it comes to actually improving items, at least there is a skill check involved there, which I appreciate, because otherwise I just don't think there's enough skill checks involved here. There are rules for making your own scrolls and potions. We kind of use this stuff from, I think, Xanathars, where you cut everything either in half or in a quarter to do consumables. You can also even create, sentient magic items and even artifact level items if you're that powerful, which brings up again the designer once again comes at me. Knowing that I would ask this question, but like, wait a minute, what is like the morals here of creating like an artificial intelligence in the item? And there's literally a sidebar right there that's like, hey, this is normally the realm of like, cyberpunk and sci-fi, but in fantasy doesn't usually have to deal with that. But here's my thoughts on that, and here's even some reading material you can use. I love that. So I appreciate, again, the designer comes in and says, you know what, it's okay. Again, puts that steady arm in there and like, I know you've got some concerns about your players enslaving AI items to their whim, but here's my thoughts on that. Very interesting idea if you wanted to create an actual like a mad scientist type character. Now, that is the first 30 pages of this rules source supplement product, right? You think Artificer's Guide to Magic Items. Oh, this is a book of magic items. There are some magic items in here, but usually when I review the magic item thing with some new like rule system, it's mostly the items, and then it's like a few pages of the rules. This product is the opposite. This product is mostly the rules, very crunchy and very robust, and then only a few pages of the actual items, or what we're looking at right now is the few spells. All of them, by the way, are of course related to artificers. They're all built for artificers, and a lot of them are built specifically for the crafting system for the artificers. So the good news is, if you like that crafting system and you want to support that through giving your players access to more spells and magic items that make their crafting more powerful, and I think items should always support the whatever the book's theme is, then this is going to be fantastic. The bad news is, if you're just hoping for some cool items for your artificer and you're not going to engage with the rules, I don't think you're going to find this as helpful, because a lot of these are specifically like it's a magic, anvil, or a magic alembic, or a magic cauldron, or something that helps, increase their crafting capabilities, or it's an artifact level box thing that lets you where is that one? Right here, this Thendar's Power Siphon that lets you like break down magic items and transfer their powers into another. It's the legendary artifact right there. I mean, there are some cool ideas. There's some gauntlets the armorer can use with interchangeable crystal discs that can do different things. That's pretty fun, but for the most part, they're gonna directly support. And there's a little what are the Eon Stones that players can normally get. This gives you those kind of stones where you can slot into your whatever the is it the battle? What is the one called with the robot pet? But whatever that one is it's designed for that subclass. So they're really cool ideas. I love them. I think they're amazing. Again, for artificers, and artificers definitely deserve to have their own cool, repertoire of items. But if you're not going to engage with the rule system, I think it's going to be of limited value. Same thing with the magic spells. Also, they all help. They're all ritual spells, which the designer, once again, comes at me and says, look, I know the Artificer doesn't normally have ritual. It doesn't normally can cast ritual spells, or they can, but they can't use the ritual feature of not spending a spell slot, I guess. But it says, hey, 1D&D is going to change it where any class can use the ritual thing. You don't have to have the ritual tag. So I'm forward thinking, and this is how it's going to, I'm like, great, thank you. This is probably should have been a sidebar here, because all the others have been sidebars, and they're, they're good, fun spells where you can just craft your items, repair items. You can change colors or engravings on your items, or just change the base item itself. It's just a magical version of your mundane crafting system. So again, all that supports that stuff. If anything, I would probably use the spells the most out of anything in this product. If I were to introduce any of this Artificer content to my group, there's probably a few items I could use for sure. If my players are obviously playing Artificer. But the spells actually probably is a great way of taking some of the items, some of the item rules, and making them where I don't have to engage with the item rules so much and just use the spells themselves, with the cost of just having to take that. I don't remember if artificers have to learn spells or how that system works. Arcanes, they probably do have to take spells to level up, so it would take that slot. But then if you're casting a ritual, it doesn't take you a spell slot necessarily to do that. You can just, do that spell, which maybe makes them a little powerful. But a lot of them also, if you notice the material cost, it does require a cost which consumes that material. So guess what? That's the entire rule system I would use right there. Just boom, you cast a spell, spend the money, and we're done. We're done. Because I will mention, like, when we did Rime of the Frost Maiden, which you can see here in the channel, all 2 years of it, all 90 sessions, I did come up with a very brief, simple crafting system for my Artificer player. We did Artificer for the first time. And there's this material called Chardolin that exists in Frost Maiden, and we made a lot of the campaign about the focus of this weird kind of ancient material. And the Artificer's whole thing was studying this material, and I gave them a chance to craft Chardolin weapons and items specifically out of raw Chardolin. So I got to limit the resource because they could only use raw Chardolin to craft, and obviously I was in charge of how much they could get. And then every time they short rested and long rested, that player got to make a tools check, or skill check, whichever, to craft certain items. And items, it might take more of a DC to craft said item, and then depending on what kind of item it was, is how many successful checks it would take. If you were just crafting Chardolin arrows, you could actually get like 5 arrows for 1 check. Versus if you're crafting 1 consumable item, it might take you just 1 check to do 1 item. If you want to craft something that was like a helmet, then it might take you 3 or 4 successful checks to craft said thing. That was probably a little too easy, but also it wasn't too hard to keep track of. The player liked engaging with it and making that. They usually just made the arrows because we had a ranger also who liked using those arrows. That was a cool way of, players, doing their skills together and having some kind of cool synergy. But that involved a little bit of money cost as well, just deducted from the successful checks. And there was no penalty if they failed the check. It's just that it took you just didn't succeed. So it would just continually take you longer time. And that's how I would stretch the time out. And it was just based on rest. There wasn't any kind of like laboratory anything. That's the kind of system that I would prefer over trying to come up with some kind of complicated algebraic math system that involved like work weeks and everything else. Is it very realistic that they can craft, on the move and make these entire magic items in only a couple days? No. But is that more fun and more satisfying for my group? Absolutely. So that's what we ended up going with. And then here's the worksheets at the end. Again, look at this worksheet. If handing this worksheet for your Artificer player and said, okay, here's how you figure out how much it's going to cost and how much time it's going to take for you to craft this item. If you think this is going to excite and interest your Artificer player, then you are going to love this product. This product is going to be awesome for you and your group, and you'll be able to engage with it to the fullest extent. If you're kind of chuckling or shaking your head, or you're even horrified by this, then you're probably not going to get a lot of good out of this product. So more than anything, I think this product may be a bit more divisive than I was picturing, just because of how intense and admittedly more realistic the rules are. Because yes, it should take a lot of time to craft. I mean, usually that's entire blacksmiths are just sitting there, like, or enchanters are crafting, like they're not out doing adventure. And I think that's probably the disconnect, is like, well, are you playing an adventurer, or are you playing somebody who sits in their laboratory and makes shit, right? Like, so I don't that's kind of hard for me to grapple with. If we are playing like fantasy crafter simulator, then this would be fantastic. But I'm playing. God, it sounds really mean if I just, well, I'm playing D&D. Like that's that's not really what I mean here. But I feel like there is kind of a disconnect there between players wanting to be adventurers and then also engage with a system that literally takes like weeks and weeks and hundreds and thousands of, tens of thousands sometimes of money to be able to craft kind of anything or even improve items. So I think there's maybe some kind of hopeful middle ground that we can create there. The good news is a lot of this rules and stuff is, of course, created a la carte. So you can take and use whatever you want. For example, if you just want to use like the improving thing and like, well, I want to let my artificers, improve items from a +1 to a +2, you can totally just engage with like that specific rule set. So in that case, it does become pretty useful. So if you're not intimidated by this, it's probably worth checking out and just seeing if any of those, individual rules could work for your group and your artificer. All right, let's go over my pros and cons for the Artificer's Guide to Magic Items. Pro, it expands the Artificer gameplay with new rules for crafting, improving, and enchanting items. Even though I have some concerns for me personally using this product, I absolutely have to give it a thumbs up because of how well it's designed. It feels very balanced. The designer did their absolute best job at presenting this to an idiot like me and trying to alleviate my concerns and, getting me interested in this system. Still not quite going to work because I'm an old fogey and I'm set in my ways. And I also know my group, more importantly. If I had a group that was like smarter than me and was, or at least a player that was, well, my players are all smarter than me, but all doctors and shit. But if they wanted to specifically engage with a system that was a lot more like mathy and robust, then I would certainly. I think the designer does a good job at onboarding me into that system to the best of their ability, while still making me a little apprehensive about using it from my point of view. Pro, the appendix includes over 10 pages of printer-friendly worksheets. Those worksheets, again, can either excite you or terrify you, but the fact that they exist, like the designer went to this level of work to actually break things down into worksheet format, which they said they would do a digital one, but apparently it's not allowed on the DM's Guild. I didn't know that, so that's actually used to me. I've been reviewing stuff for years and years, and I guess I just assumed nobody wanted to make a digital sheet versus not actually being allowed to do that. Pro, dozens of magic items and spells designed specifically for artificers. I think that's what a lot of you were expecting to get from this product, was a lot of new magic items and spells specifically for artificers. That is what is here, but there's, I think I wrote down 20 some magic items and a little less than a dozen spells, maybe like 10 new spells, which is still a lot. Like, you can definitely sell a product with just that little bit amount in there. But just there should be a caveat that, like, as good as they are, they all specifically, obviously they're for artificers, but they all specifically support and are built with the rule system in mind. So if you're not going to take that rule system at all and just wanted to look at some cool magic items, you're probably only going to want to use like maybe half of those items to be able to engage with them. And then Pro, professional layout design. I absolutely love the look of this book, the way the art looks. Just a great use of just kind of generic art, but also just nice looking art. And it's designed to look like another book that from 5th edition. So just absolutely awesome from that point of view. I kind of, for the cons, I just wrapped up all of my misgivings into one thing, which is I think there's too much math and not enough skill checks. It's just not how I want to engage with the 5e rule system. I already mentioned how my own very quick, back of the napkin system for crafting worked in my Run with the Frost Maiden campaign, for example, because specifically I was the same vein where I was like, oh, my artificer, I should have some kind of cool crafting system there, and it makes sense for this campaign specifically. But it was just built on simple skill checks, and then the time was just built over rests and not over work weeks. And I tried to keep it, again, as simple as possible. I think that was the goal. Whereas this one, I feel like the designer took something very complex and then explained it as simply as possible, which is great. That's, what is that, pedagogy? Well, I can't say that word. Where it's like the art of teaching someone. That's done very well here, but I think it still takes a system that's a little too robust and complex for me and my group, but others should get a lot out of it. In fact, our final verdict: for those seeking a crunchier, more robust rules expansion for crafting and enchantment, the Artificer's Guide to Magic Items will make a lot of artificers very happy. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. This was a long one too, my goodness. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures. here on my YouTube channel and support my work at patreon.com/Rogue Watson. Shouts to Platinum patrons Joe, Will, Thomas, Stan, Brandon, Genocider, Eclectic, Roleplay Roll, Christopher, Corey, Big Nut, John F, John L, Scott, Eric, Tyler, Nathan, Camp Crystal Lake Counselor, Andrew, Daryl, the Reldron, Captain Woody 79, Stephanie, Andy, Patrick, Jason, Ismail, Emmett, and Lumpy Spuds, and Gold patrons RPG Papercrafts, Pretty Boy, and Human, Lizard Lounge, Sam, Jerome, Nathan, Fast Like a Tortoise, Scott, Rufus, Carolyn, Jaron, Thomas, and Glenn. Thank you all very much for your support.